And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that.
Señores, sin duda alguna, Donald Trump está desesperado. Por lo menos, lo que pasó el día de hoy lo demuestra. Todo esto porque una ola azul, una marea demócrata, arrasó en las elecciones estatales. Los demócratas prácticamente ganaron todas las contiendas más importantes este martes pasado. Y bueno, ¿qué es lo que hace el trumpismo en medio de todo esto? En lugar de guardar silencio o de asumir la derrota, se pone a publicar este tipo de imágenes del Departamento del Tesoro, pero claro, con su cara en ellas. Un certificado de victoria hecho por él mismo, ¿no? Como si fuera poco, otra vez se fue volando con dinero de los contribuyentes rumbo a Miami, probablemente tal vez a Mar-a-Lago o a su resort en Doral. Ahora bien, Donald Trump, en su modo desesperado, reunió de urgencia a los senadores republicanos, porque quería dejar en claro que esto no fue culpa de él. Frente a senadores republicanos, les dijo algo que dejó a todos con cara de shock. No creo que haya sido una buena noche para ustedes, pero fue porque yo no estaba en la boleta. Así es, amigos. Su argumento es que si él hubiera estado, habrían ganado. Es más, se atrevió a culpar al cierre del gobierno que él mismo está impulsando. Escuchen.
Exactly 1 year ago we had that big beautiful victory. Exactly last night it was not expected to be a victory. It was very Democrat areas, but I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had an interesting evening and we learned a lot. And we're going to talk about that, and I'll say a few remarks, and then after that I'll ask the press to leave.
Luego trató de justificar por qué es que los republicanos fueron aplastados. Como siempre, ¿no? Sin asumir ninguna responsabilidad personal. Todos sabemos la verdad. Los demócratas ganaron por tener buenos candidatos, por tener buenos mensajes, y sobre todo, yo creo que esto es un gran porcentaje, porque millones de estadounidenses están cansados de Trump, están cansados del movimiento MAGA. Luego añadió algo mucho más patético y dijo, tal vez cuando se vayan los periodistas, hablemos en privado de lo que pasó. Todos me dicen que fue porque yo no estaba en la papeleta. No, señores, no fue por él. Fue porque él y el cierre de gobierno con los republicanos MAGA están intentando quitarle este seguro médico a más de 20 millones de personas, que están quitando y negando los alimentos subsidiados a más de 42 millones de personas. Es por ello que la gente está cansada del trumpismo, porque mientras él hace fiestas de lujo, con bailarinas en copas de champaña en Mar-a-Lago, el mismo lugar donde solía reunirse con Jeffrey Epstein, la gente está sufriendo.
But I thought we'd have a discussion after the press leaves about what last night represented and what we should do about it, and also about the shutdown, how that relates to last night. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that. And I just want to thank everybody for being here, and a very special thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance, who's doing a terrific job.
Lo mejor viene ahora, porque dijo textualmente que los demócratas son como pilotos kamikaze japoneses. Comparó al Partido Demócrata con ataques suicidas, amigos. Y según él, eso lo dijo, se lo dijeron a él, el primer ministro Takei, que por cierto, creo que el hombre ni existe. Escuchen este disparate.
I've heard that about 4 times. I heard it after Kings, they said I was a king. And I heard it after Kings. I heard it after a couple of other moments in time. And I said, no, I don't believe so. And now I heard it's after the election. I don't believe so. I think they're kamikaze pilots. I just got back from Japan. I talked about the kamikaze pilots. I think these guys are kamikaze. They'll take down the country if they have to. So I don't think so. Millions
Luego cambió el tema y empezó a hablar de Xi Jinping. Dijo que cuando lo conoció en China, los funcionarios de Xi lo escuchaban con tanta atención que él también quería que lo trataran así. Literalmente dijo, yo quiero que ustedes, o sea, ustedes republicanos, me traten como lo tratan a Xi Jinping.
So he's here, and he's got about 6 people on each side, and every one of those people was standing like this. They were at attention. And I made a comment to one of them, and I got no response. I said, are you going to answer me? I got no response. And President Xi didn't let him have any. So if there's any question, I said, I want my cabinet to behave like that. I'm demanding that I want them sitting up like that, Tim, just nice and straight. I never saw posture like that. I've never seen men so scared in their lives.
Y luego dijo otro clásico del trumpismo. Afirmó que la gente necesita mostrar una identificación para poder comprar en el supermercado.
Pure and safe because California is a disaster. Many of the states are disasters. But can you imagine when they vote almost unanimously against voter ID? All we want is voter ID. You go to a grocery store, you have to give ID. You go to a gas station, you give ID. But for voting, they want no voter ID. It's only for one reason, because they cheat. We would pass that in 15 minutes. If you don't get it, you'll never pass that. You'll never talk about mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots make it automatically corrupt. If you have mail-in ballots, automatically it's correct.
Todo esto, por cierto, era totalmente predecible. Gavin Newsom lo dijo hace un tiempo, ¿no? Donald Trump está obsesionado con destruir las instituciones, como lo hace con el filibuster, ¿no? En el Senado. Escuchen.
It's time for Republicans to do what they have to do, and that's terminate the filibuster. It's the only way you can do it. And if you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation.
Luego volvió a tocar el programa de SNAP, el que ayuda a millones de estadounidenses. Dijo que muchos lo usan fraudulentamente y que por eso quiere eliminarlo. Yo creo que todos sabemos qué es lo que busca realmente, ¿no? Castigar a los más pobres mientras él sigue enriqueciéndose.
So millions of Americans are going to be without SNAP benefits, and I will say about SNAP benefits, so when I was president, we had $7 billion worth, and now they have many times that, because these benefits were given to anybody that asked, and they're up to, I hear, just many times, 47 billion. So it wasn't the purpose of SNAP. It was for people that really had problems, down and out, people that really had problems. But during Biden, they gave it to anybody that wanted it. I think it's something you have to talk about because the numbers are incredible. But countless public servants are now not being paid, and the air traffic control system is under increasing strain. We must get the government back open soon, and really immediately. We have to get it up. We have the hottest economy we've ever had.
Luego presume de haber despedido a varios fiscales federales, porque según él, si un demócrata dice que un fiscal es competente, entonces eso significa que hay que echarlo, aunque sea republicano.
They're not going to get the approval because the Democrat, radical left lunatic senators are saying you can't, we're not going to approve you. And if we're not going to approve you, I had actually one Republican who got 2 great letters, but it turned out that he was a rhino, but that was a nice term for him. Now, he got 2 letters of approval, and when I said 2 Democrats approved him, I had to fire him because I figured if 2 Democrats approved him, they wrote the most beautiful letters. I found out, man, this is strange, and he was no good. I fired him. He was really not much of a Republican. The recommendation of that one wasn't such a good recommendation. Someday I'll tell you who recommended him, but it wasn't exactly the best.
Y claro, en medio del caos postelectoral, su siguiente gran idea fue advertir que los demócratas quieren convertir a Washington, D.C. y a Puerto Rico en estados. Según Trump, eso va a arruinarlo todo.
Nobody else is going to object. They're going to do it the first day. They're going to pack the court. They're going to make D.C. a state, and they're going to make Puerto Rico a state. So now they pick up 2 states. They pick up 4 senators. Okay, you think you have problems? They're going to do all of the things. They're going to pick up electoral votes. It's going to be a very, very bad situation, and it's done. It's done. As soon as they attain power. Now, if we do what I'm saying, they'll most likely never attain power. Because we will have passed every single thing that you can imagine that it's good and all good for the country. And there'll be no reason to. If we don't do that, people say they're not doing much and they're in power.
Más tarde, MAGA Mike Johnson también habló sobre las elecciones. Y créanme amigos, sus comentarios fueron igual de delirantes.
Yes. No, look, the question is, President Trump wasn't on the ballot. He's right about that. He and I spoke about that again, but I told him this morning what we've talked about many times and what I've said here before. The president is on the ballot in 2026. President Trump is on the ballot next fall. Because if we lose the majority, if the Republicans, the common sense people here who are doing the job for the American people, if we lose the majority in the House and this radical element of the Democrat Party were able to take over, we've already seen that movie. They will try to end the Trump administration. He won't have 4 years, he'll have only 2, because they will move to impeach him probably on the first day of the new Congress in January 2027, and they will try to systematically unwind all the important reforms that we've done for the American people, to lower costs, to have a better quality of living, on health care, to increase access and quality of care. We are the party that is doing that, and the president needs 4 years to complete his agenda, not just 2. So he is in a very real sense on the ballot. He's fiercely committed to us winning. He is going to help. He's offered to do rallies and the tele-town halls and all the things. He's sent out a huge round of endorsements of incumbents, Republican incumbents, just over the last few days. He is very much engaged, very dialed in, and he understands the stakes. President Trump is on the ballot in 2026, and we're looking forward to that contest. Yes, sir.
Los datos, por cierto, son devastadores para el trumpismo. El voto latino le dio la espalda casi por completo. Ciudades con más del 60% de población hispana, los demócratas, tuvieron giros de hasta 50 puntos a su favor. Yo me pregunto, ¿será porque Trump y Stephen Miller pasaron tanto tiempo persiguiendo, encarcelando, deportando gente solo por su piel morena? Es más, incluso a ciudadanos estadounidenses, ¿no? Pues bueno, yo creo que no hay que ser un genio para poder entender esto. Además, el Tribunal Supremo tuvo una audiencia clave sobre los aranceles internacionales que impuso Trump. De esto vamos a hablar un poco más después. Y allí vimos cómo incluso jueces más conservadores, al parecer, no están convencidos. O sea que todo esto apunta a que esos aranceles van a ser declarados inconstitucionales. Escuchen al juez Gorsuch, designado por el propio Trump, cuestionando al abogado del Departamento de Justicia.
It's a major question though. Could the president impose a 50% tariff on gas-powered cars and auto parts to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat from abroad of climate change?
It's very likely that could be done. Very likely.
I think that has to be the logic of your view.
Yeah, in other words, obviously this administration would say that's a hoax, it's not a real crisis, but...
I'm sure you would.
Yes, but that'd be a question for Congress under our interpretation, not for the courts.
All right. And then...
Y miren este dato, la generación Z está completamente en su contra. Jóvenes de 18 a 29 años votaron masivamente contra él. Pues bueno, sienten que el trumpismo les mintió, que prometió prosperidad y solo dejó deuda y crisis.
Yeah, that's right, Boris. As of late October, in the efforts in support of this proposition, spent about $80 million in just television ad revenue alone. Groups opposing it have spent about $30 million. So a lot of money being poured into this. And we're actually seeing that it appears to be working. We've actually spoken to a lot of voters who have come out, first-time voters, young voters, 18, 19-year-olds who say they either didn't or weren't able to vote in the last presidential election. And so they felt really just moved to come here and vote today. Take a listen to one voter we just spoke with.
I voted yes on Prop 50.
Where did you hear about it, and why did you feel that it was important to come out here and vote yes?
I heard about it on the news and just social media and everything, and I did some more research about it. And yeah, I really wanted to make sure that I made an effort to make sure that everybody's voice is heard and that it's a fair fight.
I spoke to another young woman who said she heard about it on TikTok. All of her friends have been talking about it, and so she knew it was important and knew she needed to come out here and vote. As we know, Proposition 50 is the only measure on the statewide ballot, so we're really struck by how many people are coming out to make sure their voices are heard on this. You can see that the workers, they're sorting ballots behind us, and we'll be keeping track on this for the rest of the day.
Y por cierto, también hubo una audiencia judicial muy importante en el caso criminal contra James Comey, el exdirector del FBI del trumpismo en el primer mandato. El juez magistrado Fitzpatrick, antiguo fiscal, ordenó que el Departamento de Justicia entregue todos los documentos del gran jurado antes de mañana. Y dejó claro algo muy brutal. Parece que el gobierno de Trump primero acusó y después investigó. Imaginen eso, acusar primero e investigar después. Vergüenza absoluta, ¿no? Pues bueno amigos, ahora vamos a hablar del tema que les mencioné hace un momento, ¿no? Y es que la Corte Suprema de los Estados Unidos escuchó los argumentos del equipo legal de Donald Trump sobre el tema de los aranceles que han sido impuestos de forma unilateral bajo la etiqueta de emergencia nacional. Lo que está en discusión no es un simple tema económico, ¿no? Es una cuestión de poder, porque Donald Trump quiere tener la autoridad para imponer tarifas sin necesidad de la aprobación del Congreso. Algo que, por cierto, si es que se acepta, va a cambiar por completo el equilibrio entre el poder ejecutivo y el poder legislativo. Aquí viene el dato interesante, que también les mencioné en ese momento, ¿no? Ni siquiera los jueces conservadores están convencidos. Jueces que él mismo nombró. Uno de los analistas que voy a mostrarles a continuación estuvo presente en esa audiencia y es Chuck Rosenberg. Y él lo resume en una frase muy simple. Parecían escépticos. Y créanme amigos, eso no es poca cosa.
Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Chuck Rosenberg, senior correspondent at Vox, Ian Millhiser, and non-resident fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and senior director of international economics during the Biden administration, Peter Harrell. All right, Chuck, were they skeptical?
They seemed skeptical. I'm not surprised because what the government was asking for here was broad. They were asking for authority, essentially, to levy taxes. As Justice Kavanaugh said today, the Supreme Court needs to figure out what it means to regulate imports. According to the president and his legal team, that would mean that would include, I should say, Katie, the imposition of tariffs. According to the challengers, that authority, essentially to tax, is reserved exclusively to the Congress.
So they did sound skeptical in places, certainly. I wonder what your expectation is for when they might rule on this, because usually we get these rulings in June, but this is something that Americans are dealing with every single day.
Yeah. So I'd like to say this is an educated guess, but I'm not all that educated, so it's just a guess. But the Supreme Court, at the government's request, did fast-track this argument, Katie. And so it makes sense to me that they would probably try and fast-track an opinion. Normally, when they hear cases in October and November and December, we can expect a decision, next June. I imagine it would be quicker than that.
Let me play Neil Gorsuch questioning Inspector General Sauer today. This is Solicitor General Sauer. This is soundbite number 1.
I want to explain to me how you draw the line, because you say we shouldn't be concerned because this is foreign affairs and the president has inherent authority, and so delegation off the books, more or less. And if that's true, what would prohibit Congress from just abdicating all responsibility to regulate foreign commerce, for that matter, declare war, to the president?
We don't contend that he could do that. If it did,
why not? What's the reason to accept the notion that Congress can hand off the power to declare war to the president?
Well, we don't contend that. Again, that would
well,
be...
you do. You say it's unreviewable. There's no manageable standard, nothing to be done. And now I think tell me if I'm wrong. You backed off that position.
Maybe that's fair to say.
Okay, all right.
That would be,
Thank
I think, an abdication. That would really be an abdication, not a delegation.
I'm delighted to hear that,
Ian, this was such an interesting moment because that ability to declare war is a congressional power. The presidents try to get around it all the time. There's reporting the president might be trying to get around it right now to take matters into his own hands in Venezuela. That's from the New York Times. But explain exactly what Justice Gorsuch was trying to get at, and explain the significance of Sauer changing his argument midstream.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I guess, political history underlying that statement by Justice Gorsuch. So I've covered the Federalist Society, which is kind of the lawyers' wing of the Republican Party for more than a decade now. And beginning in the Obama administration, they were very concerned about President Obama and later President Biden making aggressive assertions of executive power. And they the Federalist Society started to come up with new theories for how you could rein in presidential power. The one that they eventually settled on is this thing called the Major Questions Doctrine, which is the idea that when a president does something that's too ambitious, it has too much of an impact on our economy or too much political impact, that's not allowed. It doesn't matter if there's an existing statute that allows them to do it, they got to go back and they got to get a new law. And one question going into this oral argument was, now that we have a Republican president, would the justices actually follow this Major Questions Doctrine that they came up with to stop presidents like Biden and Obama, or would they give Trump an exemption to it? And Gorsuch, at least, seems to feel that the Major Questions Doctrine does apply to Donald Trump. Chief Justice Roberts also asked some questions suggesting that he believed that it also applies to Republican presidents. Not all of the Republican justices were there. I think that Thomas and Kavanaugh and Alito are probably going to vote with Trump in this case. But it looks like, at least amongst the Republican justices, they seem to be evenly split on whether or not this doctrine should apply to presidents of both parties.
So, Peter, you were in the room. You saw this happening, not just with voices, but with faces. Tell me what it sounded like to you inside the courtroom.
Well, it was a very tough morning for Solicitor General Sauer. I thought you had skepticism of the government's position from across the board and across the ideological spectrum. Now, there were clear differences. You could see that, Justice Alito, possibly Justice Thomas, were trying to maybe get to yes for how this 1977 emergency powers statute might authorize some tariffs, but even they, I think, had some questions about whether it would really authorize the kind of unbounded tariffs that Trump has in fact imposed. And I also thought it was interesting to see some of the Republicans justices, some of the conservative justices, think quite directly and ask quite directly about what this could mean in the future. So there was a question that was asked of Solicitor General Sauer, well, could a future president declare a climate emergency and tariff car companies out of existence? And he basically said, well, we think climate change is a hoax, but kind of conceded that on the government's argument, a future president could do that. And you could see that kind of sinking in with a couple of the Republican justices. Yeah, the implications for what expanding these powers could mean in the future. I thought that was an interesting argument that was made. I also wonder, we don't have time to get into this because it's going to be very complicated, if they do rule in favor of or not in favor of the president and his tariff emergency authority, how they roll it back and how people potentially get refunds. But that'll save for another day. Chuck and Ian and Peter, gentlemen.
Exactamente, ¿no? Parecían escépticos. No es para menos. Lo que el equipo de Trump está pidiendo es una especie de carta blanca para que Donald Trump y en futuro cualquier presidente, ¿no?, pueda imponer aranceles sin pasar por el Congreso. En otras palabras, convertir la economía en una herramienta de poder político personal. La Constitución de los Estados Unidos es clara. Solo el Congreso puede imponer impuestos o tarifas o aranceles, ¿no? Entonces, una vez más vemos cómo Trump quiere reinterpretar eso para poder tener control directo sobre el comercio internacional. Y claro, estos jueces, hasta los conservadores, saben que si ceden en esto, van a abrir una puerta muy pero muy peligrosa. Durante esta audiencia, el juez Neil Gorsuch lo dejó al descubierto con una pregunta que fue demoledora. Si el presidente puede imponer tarifas y límites, ¿por qué no podría también declarar la guerra sin el Congreso? O sea, cuando incluso un juez como este, conservador y encima designado por Trump, se ve obligado a decir que eso sería una abdicación del poder del Congreso, pues bueno, ya sabemos que este argumento se cayó en pedazos, porque lo que Trump está defendiendo no solo es política comercial, es una idea autoritaria, pura y dura, la de que un presidente va a poder actuar por encima de cualquier ley, más aún del Congreso, y cuando le convenga políticamente. Ahí, señores, es donde todo cambia, porque lo que Trump está pidiendo no solo amenaza a la democracia, sino también el poder del futuro del conservadurismo. Al final, esta audiencia no solamente fue el tema de los aranceles, sino que se trata de un intento del trumpismo por romper los límites del poder presidencial, dejar al Congreso como un simple espectador. Y lo más revelador es que esta vez la propia Corte Suprema parece que está por decir: hasta aquí, señor, basta. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que la Corte Suprema realmente va a ponerle un freno a Donald Trump? ¿O será que van a terminar cediendo otra vez ante la presión política? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.